Today, we are going to talk about how to stay emotionally centered during uncertain times, maybe even play at work. For us to do that, I have a special guest with me, Gary. Gary, please introduce yourself.
Thank you so much, Sue, for having me. My name is Gary Ware. I run a company called Breakthrough Play. It is our mission to use play and playful methods as a way to help individuals and teams communicate better, collaborate better, and at the end of the day, just be the best versions of themselves.
Love it. Perfect. You're exactly who we should be talking to. So, I wanted to really do this video today because people are like, "Oh, I'm struggling to just stay centered or emotionally stable during these uncertain times." And so I'm really glad that we get to speak today. So, of course, I have a whole bunch of questions. But the first question I would like to talk about is first question that I have for you is tell me about the importance of play as adults.
Yes, this is something I get all the time because most people, when you ask them about play, they think it's something that just kids do
Mm,
and you play when the work is done. But truth is, play is actually how our work gets done. When we are playful and we play, the body is flooded with all these neurochemicals, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins, and that's what helps us be creative. It also helps us create. It helps us feel like we belong. So it's essential to being the best versions of ourselves.
mm. What I would like to add to that is I think this expectation we have as adults that joy will come to us, that centeredness and emotional centeredness will come to us is perhaps a misconception. We have to create joy, we have to create centeredness. What are some tactics to stay emotionally centered during uncertain times?
Yes. So first, I want to paint this picture. When times are uncertain, our system goes into this overdrive. We go into
Mm,
like fight, flight, or freeze.
mm,
And when that happens, we actually take our creative centers offline.
mm,
And so, in order to balance that, I like to encourage folks to be intentional and think about what are some things that they can do that will allow them to feel joy? What are some
mm,
things that they can do that will allow them to connect with others?
mm,
Because play, as I mentioned before, sometimes is seen as like, oh, we're just sort of goofing off. But there's so many different ways that we can be playful. And I want to also put a fine point on this. Play is doing something that when you're in it is not about the outcome. It's just something that you can be doing for hours at a time.
mm.
And those things are going to be the things that are going to get us out of that fight, flight, or freeze and back to our prefrontal cortex and our ability to be creative and be rational about things. So it varies from person to person. I allow, I talk to folks and I say, what are some things other than your work
Mm,
that you can do to just stimulate yourself? And that can be going for a walk. That
mm,
can be, taking 5 or 10 minutes and reading a book. It could be like for me, I at an arm's length have a bag of Legos handy. And when I'm feeling that moment of stress, I take a moment to just pause and just tinker with those Legos. Just again for 5 minutes. It's very meditative for me and it
mm,
allows me to recenter.
mm, mm. So, I mean, it really can be anything
It can be
that
anything.
gives you that moment of joy or that moment of distraction or that moment of enjoying the process, is what I
Yes.
heard you say. So it could be playing with Legos, it could be doodling, right? It could be reading a book, going for a walk, it could be, listening to a favorite song, it could be watering your plants, it could be playing with your pets, any of those things. So if you're not sure what brings you joy or what you can do for play, how do you find one for yourself?
Love this question because it also, again, to reiterate what we said before,
Yeah.
a lot of times we think, oh, it's just going to come to me. uh,
Mhm.
we have to be intentional.
Yeah.
And Dr. Stuart Brown, he wrote this amazing book on play and how it shapes our mind and whatnot. He says, take a play history. Think
Mm,
of what are the things that you used to do when you were younger that brought you joy, and how can you bring a piece of that back into the now? And it may
mm,
require some remixing, some creativity. Quick story: I was working with someone, and their form of play was a pre 2020 was travel.
mm,
So they would have trips in their calendar, things that they look forward to. And again, those little breaks
mm,
refueled them. So then when they got back to work, they were engaged and whatnot. But in 2020, when everything was shut down, they couldn't have that. And they were experiencing a lot of burnout and
mm,
stress, and it was impacting their work. And when we did a play history, we found it that this person, when they were younger, they loved playing with dolls, but they didn't want to just go buy a Barbie, just they didn't just feel right with them, even though there's nothing wrong with that.
mm-mm,
If that is something that costs you, please, uh, by all means, do that. But after a little bit of digging and unpacking, we found that the essence of their playing with Barbies were the nurturing aspect. It brought them so much joy to do that.
mm,
So we got creative and we found that gardening and explicitly succulents was something that they were willing to explore and play with.
mm, mm,
And that gave them an excuse to take these breaks. And they found themselves researching care and different ways that you can propagate succulents. And again, now they had things to look forward to. And instead of taking time to scroll social media or jump into email, they spent time dealing with that. And it brought them a lot of joy. And I'm happy to report, as of now, as of this recording, they have over 200 succulents in their
my
care.
goodness.
And for them, it's pure play. Now,
Mm,
for you, that might, you think of that and you might think like, no, that's not me. And that's why it's very personal. But here's the thing. What if you can create what I call a playlist? What are little things that you're curious about, little things that you can do in different amounts of time? That way, when you do find yourself with an extra 10 minutes or so, instead of doing our default mode of jumping into email or scrolling social media, boom, you break out your playlist and then you try something.
mm. I love that. Sometimes we think of playlists as music playlist, but why not a sort of a happy playlist, right? A
Yes,
literal
activity playlist.
literal playlist. I love it.
Yes.
Um, I also just to go back to because I feel like the example you gave is pretty deep. The person finding joy in nurturing succulents, plants. It's pretty deep because what I'm hearing you say is it's not about the what, it's about the essence of what brings you joy. So for
Yes.
example, I assume Legos isn't maybe you also love Legos, but it's also the tactileness,
Check out,
the
right?
clicking, the creativity, the building and the dismantling of it that brings you joy. So
Yes.
so doing a deeper dive into the actual thing that brings you joy, not the what, but
Yeah.
I don't know what to call it, the
It's the
core of
essence.
what
Yeah.
brings
What
you
about
joy.
it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if walking, it's the physical walking may bring you joy because it actually takes you away from your desk,
Yes. Right.
right?
Yes. Exactly.
Playing
Yeah.
sports may bring you joy because it takes such physical exertion that you can't think about anything else. So just doing a
Agreed.
deeper dive.
Yeah. And
So
one more thing with that, Dr.
please,
Stuart Brown came up with these play personalities.
play personalities. Okay,
Yes.
say more.
And so I'll quickly go through them. And as I'm going through, think about what is sparking your curiosity, because that could be a path to finding something that you could play
Hmm,
with. So the
okay.
big one, and this is what most people think of when they think of play, is the play personality of the Joker. And
Mm,
if the Joker is your play personality, you get joy from being mischievous, as in pranks and telling jokes and things like that. That's just one play personality. Another one is the competitor. Again, something that a lot of folks think about. And play for you is competing against yourself and against others, but that sort of act of bettering and improving brings you joy, and it could take so many different forms from, yes, sports, but maybe it's competing against yourself of filling out your invoices and things like that.
Right.
Again, I
Chess,
love
right. Mhm.
the essence of it.
Mm,
Another play personality is the kinesthetic. And so this is all
mm,
about the movement.
mm,
Yes, you may like to play basketball, but it's not the competitiveness of it, but maybe it's the fact that you're moving your body. And so there's so many different ways that you can express these. Another play personality is the storyteller. And for
mm,
someone who likes that play personality, it's all about diving deep into stories and getting lost into stories. It could be books, it could be movies, it could be having conversations with folks and hearing their stories. Another word is the collector.
mm,
And collecting could be collecting stamps in your passport.
mm,
It could be collecting memorabilia. It could
mm,
be collecting experiences. But the
mm,
act of collecting something brings you a lot of joy. Another one is the explorer.
mm,
And if the that speaks to you, it's exploring again through travel. It could be exploring through reading. The exploration and uncovering something that you didn't know before lights you up.
mm,
And then, of course, yeah, we have the artist,
mm,
and that could be through art expression, through painting. It could be through spoken word. The act of creating something again lights you up. And then one that is not included by Dr. Stuart Brown, but I find it very playful and I talk about it a lot, is the connector. And the connector gets joy out of, again, connecting with others in so many different ways, or helping others connect. So those are, again, different play personalities, and there might be one or a few that speaks to you. You're like, oh yeah, that really calls to me. And maybe there's some that are you're curious about. And this is the cool thing about play and playfulness. It allows you to experiment.
mm. I love the fact that you identify different play personalities, because it both simultaneously limits you and frees you. Right?
Yes.
Don't assume that you're one. It could be multiple. Just because one worked for you 10 years ago doesn't mean you're the same play personality now. And also, it explains why something that works for you, I tried and I'm like, oh, well, that doesn't work for me. So play's not for me. Right. So
Right?
it just may mean that I didn't try the one that fits me today, kind of
Exactly.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And they can be expressed in so many different ways.
Yes.
Yes, it can
Yes.
be expressed outside of your work, but you can also look at that play personality through the lens of your work.
Hmm. Hmm. Say more about that.
Yeah. So, for example, I'll just take one of the easiest ones, the competitor.
Mm.
How can you, again, compete against yourself? You don't necessarily have
Mm.
to compete. Oftentimes, when we think about competition, we think about competing against other people. And with every sort of play things, there's a light side and a shadow side. And the shadow side of the competitor can be you get outside of the play itself, and it becomes like too competitive. And then you start to change your own personality in a way that is not, ethical or whatnot. But if you tend to be a competitive person,
Hmm.
especially when it comes to tedious things, I
Mm.
was working with someone and I said, all right, the thing that they hated doing was invoicing. It just was very tedious and whatnot. And then I said, what if you set a timer and see
Mm.
how quickly you can get through without making mistakes? And could you better the time? Or could you complete more in a same amount of time? So it's activating that play personality in them to do the work. If you're the type that is the explorer, you know, are there different ways that you could figure out how to complete your work? And then dive down that. If you're the collector, um, you know, when you finish something, what if you gave yourself a little check mark and you're collecting, you know, different tokens or something like that? Again, it's very playful in nature, but it ties back into the essence of the work and it
Mm.
personalizes it.
Mm. I like that. Back to sort of if you have a competitive play personality, you could lean into that at work. I mean, not only that invoicing, were you able to do it as quickly as possible without making any mistakes? Can you beat the time that it took you yesterday, right?
Right? Yes.
Right? And you also, we also know those people who, when we say you can't, that can't be done, they're at it, right? I
Right?
will prove you wrong, kind of. So why not tap into that? Because that
Exactly.
will, sort of get your juices flowing, if you will, which will allow
Yeah.
you to even function better, produce better, be more innovative, be more productive, and all of that.
Tries
Um,
to it taps into your intrinsic behavior, intrinsic
mm,
motivation. There's an
mm,
amazing book called Primed to Perform by
mm,
Lindsay McGregor and Neil Dosey. I think I said that right. But they talk about shifting from extrinsic motivators that we
mm,
tend to do in business all the time. And again, what got us to one place is not always going to get us to another place. It was
mm,
very great when the work that we were doing was very tactical and repetitive. And those extrinsic motivators are emotional pressure, economic pressure, and inertia. As in emotional pressure, hey, don't make a mistake or else you're going to get, in trouble. Economic pressure, hey, your pay is going to be, your pay is tied to your output. And then inertia, we've always done it this way. And again, that's great for repetitive work where you just want people to do things exactly the same way all the time, but it takes us out of the work. And when you need folks to be creative, when you need folks to think on their feet and give more into the work, it's not, you're only going to get so much. So the
mm,
intrinsic motivators are play, purpose, and potential. Play, you see the work as play. Again, you can tie your play personality to the work and again, you do it for the sake of the work, not necessarily the outcome. But purpose is the impact of the work. Wow,
mm.
we did such a great job. Can you believe the impact that we made because of the work that we did? And then potential is all about growth. So again, play is, I love that they mentioned play is at the center of all of this, but it's not, as I mentioned before, of like goofing around this, that, and the other. It's all about getting into the essence of the work and seeing it as something worth pursuing.
And if all three align, or maybe even two out of three
Yes.
align, that's what separates the kind of feeling we have at the end of the workday.
Yes.
And we all know the difference between happy tired and just tired,
Tired. Yes.
right? If you feel like you've accomplished something, or it met some intrinsic value,
Yes.
or it met a certain purpose, or it's something that we actually enjoy doing, we're almost happy tired. As
Yeah.
opposed to
Right.
if we were going against the grain, we're just tired, tired,
Exhausted.
right?
Tired. Tired. Yes.
Yeah. Um, You said it earlier, like when we're at play and when we're leaning into our intrinsic sort of characteristics and so forth, that it also helps us, it all helps induce endorphins, all of this stuff. Can you talk more about the connection of play, purpose, outcome, impact, all intrinsic with being emotionally centered and feeling um, somewhat secure is not a good word, but just sort of stable when things are just so not stable sometimes.
Yeah. So this is the thing. When we are in fight, flight, or freeze,
Mm,
it's only meant to be a short period of time. And our brains are a little bit outdated. And this is what got us out of danger, out of immediate danger. There's saber-toothed tigers. Oh my gosh, it's out to get us. Boom, we're in fight, flight, or freeze. And actually, the blood rushes to our extremities, our hands and our feet. And it takes us out of that sort of being able to be creative. We're just trying to react. But it's meant to just be short term. And then once it's done, we complete the cycle by getting to the rest and digest. Well, that same sort of feeling is activated sometimes when we check our inbox or when we see our to-do list or all the things in life that are stressing us out. When we are in this play-like state, it counteracts that. We get those neurochemicals that I mentioned: dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. And the easiest way to remember that is an acronym called DOSE. And so this is important because it stabilizes us so that we can be the best version of ourselves, so that we can be creative. Because when we are running on adrenaline and cortisol, the stress hormone, that is not, it's not stable. It's not sustainable.
And it wasn't meant to be. A flight, fight or flight or stress or adrenaline or trauma was never meant to be a permanent state of being. And what we're finding is for more and more of us, it's becoming a more sustained state of being. And so what I'm hearing you say is break that cycle and create the moments of play.
Yes.
Um, in a conversation we had, you and I also had done a Instagram live, which I've thoroughly enjoyed. One of the concepts that you talked about was the concept of micro rest. Talk
Yes.
to me about that. So there's play. Talk to me about rest.
Yes. So rest is important. And I feel like as a society, we don't have a good relationship with it because, and I'm speaking from my own experience. I used to have this sort of point of view is I can, I have to deserve rest. I have to earn it. And if that's your point of view, then oftentimes you're going to see moments of rest as not productive, as something that, I didn't get enough done, so I shouldn't be able to rest. But the problem is we need to complete that cycle. And the proper way to look at it is I like to work from a place of rest, not work for rest. And if you see rest as something that rejuvenates you, gives you the ability to work more, then you would change your behavior. And that's what play did for me. Because when you see the work as play, again, we're wired for play, it's in our DNA. You're going to work just enough. And then you're going to, again, let's take this to like the area of sports. You're playing whatever the sport is, pickleball, soccer, pick up basketball. You don't just keep going, going, going. You have moments of breaks, recharge so that you can jump in. Again, when I talk about it like this, everyone says, oh, yeah, makes perfect sense. You would be silly to not do that. When you lift weights, it's in that moment of rest that your muscles repair itself and allows you to get stronger. But we don't often see the same with our like professional work.
Mm.
And as humans, we're very bad at judging our ability to do things. And there's a lot of research that shows that when we're in a state of being tired, we're prone to make more mistakes. So going back to micro rest, these are the little moments in between the work that allows us to recharge so that we can get back in the work and be even more productive. Get back into the work and make less mistakes. And at the end of the day, be more productive than someone that is just powering through. And if I can just share a quick story
Please.
to highlight this, about, I want to say about 10 plus years ago, I used to run this thing called Recess for adults. And it's after work sort of situation. It was very playful, very intentional. And when I kicked it off, I invited all of my friends and colleagues, and I had a really close friend that I worked with at the time. Was like, "Yeah, Gary, I'm going to be there." And about 15 minutes before it was about to start, I got a text saying, "Work is piling up. I don't think I can make it." So I immediately called them and I said, "Hey, do you trust me?" And they said, "Of course I do." I was like, "Look, I'm working on the same project you are, and I know that you're probably thinking that you're going to have to do an all nighter. Since you're going to be working late anyway, just take a quick break at this point where we were having the event. It was a short walk from our office. Just come and just stay for about 20 minutes or so, give you a chance to take a break and then get back to work and see what happens." They're like, "All right, cool." So they came to the event. Not only did they stay the whole time, they didn't leave after 15 minutes. They stayed the whole time. They didn't go back to work. They actually went home, got a good night's rest, got to work a little bit early, and was done in about an hour and a half, whereas they were expecting to be there way later. So again, having that micro break, that micro rest allowed them to get a good sort of level set on what's going on. And when they jumped into the work, they got more done in less time.
You used a sports analogy earlier, so I'm gonna kind of use that too. What I'm hearing you say is in a sports game, let's professional sports game, halftime could be seen as reward for the first half, or it could be seen as resting for the second half.
Yes.
And what I'm hearing you say is rest is to make you be able to play better. It's an investment towards the second half of the game,
Yes.
not a reward for the first half of the game. Am I hearing you correctly?
You're absolutely correct. It is getting us prepared to jump back into the work. And it's something that they just naturally do.
Mhm,
Again,
mhm.
to not do that would be seen as not a good investment, would be
Right,
seen as silly.
right, right. Um, it's almost we could see halftime in sports as a reset time. It's not a time to
Reset.
reset. But it could
Yes.
also be seen as a rest time so that you could play that much better the second half.
Yes.
We could also see it as transition time. So talk to me about that. Talk to me about how and I also want to dive more into micro rest too. So, but
Yes.
before we do, talk to me about the need for transition time.
Yes. It's important for our brains so that we can be in the right headspace. Oftentimes, so thinking about us as professionals, oftentimes we do it unintentionally and we don't realize the benefits that it have. Think about those transitions that you have between the work, the commute to the office,
Hmm.
walking time in between meetings, lunch, all those things. We just do them because we do them, but we don't really realize the impact that it has on us.
Mm,
And it really came into play going back to 2020 when everything shut down and we were
hmm.
forced to work from home. And we didn't have those things that were sort of built into our sort of day to days and that we took for granted. And then we read so many stories about people working way more than they've ever worked before, experiencing way more burnout, way less connection. And so now we need to really sort of unpack these things and realize the value that they have because, in an effort to be quote unquote efficient, we cut those things out and we didn't realize it was actually helping us be more efficient because it gave us time to reset our brains. It gave us a time to center ourselves so that we can jump into whatever that is and be our whole self. Microsoft did a study where they had EKG machines on their employees and they managed and watched stress levels in between meeting to meeting to meeting. And the individuals that didn't have any breaks, by the fifth meeting, their brains were fried. It was lit up like a Christmas tree in all the wrong ways. However, the folks that took these micro breaks and had these rituals and transitions in between meetings, by the fifth meeting, they were in some cases more refreshed than at the start of,
Mm,
of their day.
mm,
So
mm.
the research is clear. It's essential for our well being, for our ability to be productive, to have these micro breaks, these rituals, these transitions, so that our brains, which are muscles, which are important for our survival and ability to do our jobs, can reset.
Absolutely, absolutely. One of my favorite examples of my own transition is when I drive from work to home and I sit outside my house for a good 15 minutes just to clear my brain, just to almost take off my work self and put on my home self. But during that sweet time, it's just me, and how that's so helpful to me. I come into the house, fully ready to answer the question, "How was your day?" I come into that house fully able to listen to someone when they tell me how their day was, as opposed to because we assume if we just don't transition and just keep going. Well, let me put it this way: if I don't take that 15-minute sit in my car by myself transition, Gary, what I find is I will go home and I'll ask everybody, "How's your day? How's your day?" And they're answering me and I'm not hearing. Because the transition in my brain is gonna happen with or without me. And so I find that I'm able to absorb, able to function more efficiently and effectively, able to not if I don't do that rest in my car, I find not only do I not hear people when they tell me how their day is, sometimes I ask them 5 or 6 times, for them to repeat something, or I find that I'm going this way and then I go back that way again, forgetting what I was doing. In other words, I am not effective. And so for me, that transition and that micro rest is that 15 minutes in the car between work and home. What are some other examples of micro rests
Yeah.
that people can do?
After a meeting, what's your
Mm,
rituals after you get off of a call? Do you jump straight into your work, jump straight into email, or do you take time to reset your brain?
mm,
That's one of the biggest ones. If and I love technology to help with this. I have
mm,
a new sort of feature that if someone were to schedule a meeting with me, it can't schedule a back-to-back meeting. It will only give them the option of doing something that's like it gives that automatic 15-minute buffer.
mm,
So that's one of the big ones. You talked about transition and rituals for those micro breaks, between work and home. What about the opposite?
mm,
When you're coming into the office, I, and this is something that, because I used to work in a co-working space and I would have that commute. Now I work from home. And so I still give myself a commute and sometimes it's just walking around, the block. But again, there's just this moment of reflection so that
mm,
when I get to my desk, I'm able to be present. I'm able to take what I was doing before and set it aside and and doing, getting right into the work. Other sort of micro breaks you can do with others. And it's in the form of rituals of like sort of check-in rituals before a meeting. What are the intentional things that you're doing to get everyone on the same page? And it again, they may have been seen as like, oh, we're just sort of killing time. No, these are essential again to give you that dose DOSC, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins, so that you can be effective in the meeting, so that folks can sort of check out of what they were doing before and check into the meeting. You'll find that your meetings stay, more on track. You have everyone's presence instead of, you know, everyone is just sort of in their own head and not completely focused.
mm. Absolutely. And for those who are in the retail space or anything like that, actually take the breaks that you've been assigned, right? Actually
Yes,
take them. I mean, sometimes you have to go do errands, but if you can, actually use breaks for what it's intended to, which is transition, which is to get some rest, some moment of joy or play that helps you for the rest of the day, right? Yeah. Sometimes stress comes from work.
it does.
So tell me about the difference between fitting in at work and belonging at work.
Gosh. So fitting in is all about shrinking yourself to match that culture, and
Yeah.
belonging is about expanding the culture so that everyone can show up fully. When people not only like fit in, um, so let me reverse that. Let's talk about fitting in. When people are sort of forced to fit in, they usually hide ideas. They
Mhm.
play it safe. They put on masks because they have this feeling that if they bring out their true self or these ideas, that they may be ridiculed and whatnot. It also causes a level of stress because we have this feeling like, I don't know if people are going to accept me. And one of the things, bringing back what I love to talk about, play is one of the fastest ways to break that all down and create that level of psychological safety where people can be their true self. And I know that play does require you to be very vulnerable. So that's one of the reasons why people shy away from it. However, if you can create playful moments that invite people in, you will find that now you're creating this space of belonging because they have the psychological safety and people feel like they can bring their true self. And as a result, you get, less stress because people aren't in their head thinking like, I don't know what people are going to think about me. You get better ideas because people aren't fear. They don't have this fear that their ideas are going to be met with ridicule.
Renee Brown said the opposite of belonging is fitting in. And fitting in, as you stated, is exhausting. Masking, code switching, holding something in, uh, masking a certain part, that's all exhausting. Um, and that requires sort of just a lot of energy that you could spend elsewhere being creative, being more productive, being more innovative, etc. And one of the ways, what I'm hearing you say is one of the ways to demask a little bit for people to be a little freer is through play.
Yes, exactly.
Um, so how do you play at work? I know we talked about it a little earlier, but what are some other ways you could play at work?
This is perfect sort of flow and transition. So we talked about fitting in and masking it and creating this space of belonging and realizing that play is one of the fastest way to do that. Often folks get confused when I say, "Oh, create a playful space," and they
Mm,
think it's all about creating ping pong tables or having pizza Fridays. And don't get me wrong, those are great. However, the challenge is if you don't create an environment where folks feel like they have permission to do these things, is going to uh, backfire. The real thing is all about being intentional and
mm,
designing moments of curiosity, connection, and creativity into the work itself. And
mm,
so it could be just like what we talked about before a meeting, taking time to create a connection activity. That's one way that you can play at work. It could be thinking about breaks and rest and having playful moments to do that, whether
mhm,
it's encouraging folks to take walks or movement, creating a space where and be intentional about having folks sort of come together and have conversations with each other. Those are the best ways that we can create an environment where folks can play and feel like they have permission. So the key here is intentionality.
mm,
I remember when I was facilitating uh, a session, the client told me that, we don't need fun right now. Like we're really busy. We just
mhm,
need to focus.
mhm,
And I quickly saw that their team, looked very stressed out. And again, with work, it's not always going to be perfect, right? We're going to have moments where we need to sort of dive in, heads down, and we have stuff we have to do. But it shouldn't be, as we mentioned before, it shouldn't be all the time, every day, always, because that is not a recipe for success. But the interesting thing, going back to this group, I said, all right, I hear you and I see you. What if we just started small? Because clearly, the team, is looking a little bit frazzled and stressed. And we did 20 minutes. We did a few activities here and there, and I was able to tie it back into the work that they were doing. So, they were able to, one, take a step back, do something that connected with each other. There was some laughs and whatnot, and they tied it back to their work. And then they found that they dove back into the work. They were that much more focused. So I like to say, if you are a little bit unsure about the approach of doing this, I have an acronym for you. It's called MAP, MAP. And M is the method. What's your method of playfulness? A is the audience. And P is the purpose. What are we trying to achieve? So if you take it from that approach and you're more intentional, you're going to find that you're going to get better results overall.
mm. And also having the safety for people to opt out. Right?
Yes.
If it's not for them, if taking a walk during a meeting is not for them, they can safely, with psychological safety, say,
Yes.
"That's not for me." So, um, we have talked about micro rests. We talked about the need for transition, whether it's from work to home, home to work, between meetings, etc. We talked about leaning into your play character, finding out what your play character is, what innately brings you joy. We talked about finding moments of play at work, and play means many different things. And I also loved your concept of we don't work to earn rest. We rest so that we could work better. Anything else you want to add as it relates to finding joy, as it relates to staying emotionally centered during uncertain times, things like that, please. Anything else you would like to add?
Yeah. I want to let people know that if you are experiencing burnout and you're having a rough time, it's okay to realize that there is something else. Because oftentimes when we're in that, it's kind of hard to see.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my invite to you is to just start small and see what happens. The reason why I love play is an experimentation. And we said this, and I will say it again because it's worth repeating, is that it may not be perfect the first time, but the cool thing about all of this is that it is meant to help you in the long term.
That I love that. Admit that you're having difficulties. um, Lean into not only acknowledging it, but then lean into what can help you with that. And play helps with that. And
Yes,
it may not be perfect the first time, but keep going. Because, like you said at the beginning, play is finding joy in the moment, in the process of play.
yes,
Anything else? All right. Well, Gary, it has been an absolute pleasure and a joy to talk
yes.
to you. I love the energy that you bring and this whole concept of bringing play to work. It sounds obvious, but it is very important and can absolutely be done. So thank you so much, Gary, for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having us, holding space. And I want to just acknowledge you for creating this platform that is inspiring and informative and is really helping a lot of folks.
I'm so glad. Thank you. And for those of you who like this video and want to see more content about everything related to jobs and careers, feel free to like, comment, and of course, subscribe. See you next time.